My name is Alex Ryder. Or, well, it was Alex Ryder. Names don't mean much anymore. They're just sounds, echoes from a world that choked on its own screams and drowned in blood. Before the world ended, I was nobody special. Just another face in the sprawling, indifferent metropolis of Havenwood City. I worked IT support for a mid-sized logistics company downtown, the kind of place with beige cubicles, flickering fluorescent lights, and the constant low hum of servers that became the soundtrack to my life. My days were a predictable cycle. Wake up before the sun. Fight traffic on the I-95, troubleshoot printer. Jams and password resets for people who clicked on things they shouldn't have. Fight traffic back home. Microwave dinner, maybe watch some mindless TV or lose myself in a video game. Sleep, repeat. Exciting, right? I lived alone in a small, two-bedroom house in a quiet suburban neighborhood called Maple Creek. It was the kind of place where lawns were meticulously kept. Kids rode bikes down the sidewalks in the summer, and the biggest event of the year was the neighborhood block party. It was comfortable, safe, boringly, beautifully normal. Little did I know that normalcy was a fragile veneer, stretched thin over a chasm of unimaginable horror, and it was about to tear wide open. The first signs were subtle, easy to dismiss. Whispers on the fringes of the news cycle. Reports of a strange, aggressive flu strain popping up in remote parts of Southeast Asia. Then, isolated incidents in European port cities. Violent outbreaks, quickly contained. Authorities assured us. Drug-related psychosis, one headline read. New synthetic compound causing extreme aggression. Speculated another. The internet, of course, buzzed with wilder theories. Bioweapons, government experiments, even divine wrath. I scrolled past them, filed them under internet, crackpots, and went back to resetting Margaret's password from accounting for the third time that week. It was early October when things started feeling off. Not overtly threatening, just strange. There was an undercurrent of tension in the city you could almost taste, like the air before a violent thunderstorm. Sirens seemed more frequent, their wails cutting through the usual urban drone. At odd hours, on my commute, I started noticing more erratic driving, more short tempers flaring up over minor incidents. People seemed jumpier, their eyes darting around nervously. At work, the calls changed subtly. Fewer printer issues, more calls about network outages in specific buildings, garbled communications from remote shipping hubs. Emails bounced back from addresses that had been active just days before. My boss, Mr. Henderson, a man whose composure was usually as starched as his shirts, started looking perpetually frazzled, spending hours in hushed phone calls behind his closed office door. One afternoon, trying to trace a network issue in our Phoenix branch, I stumbled across a fragmented security feed transmission before it cut out entirely. It wasn't clear, just jerky black and white footage from a loading dock camera. It showed figures moving erratically, stumbling, twitching. Then chaos. People running, scattering. One figure tackled another, not like a fight, but like predator and prey. The jerky movements, the way the attacker seemed oblivious to anything but its target. the sheer ferocity. It sent a cold spike down my spine. The feed died before I could make sense of it. I tried to pull it back up, checked server logs, pinged the remote system, nothing. Dead air. I mentioned it to Dave, the guy in the next cubicle, a cynical network engineer who'd seen it all. Weird feed flicker from Phoenix, I said, trying to sound casual. Looked like a riot or something. Dave didn't even look up from his monitor. Probably just some tweakers, man. Places crawling with M. Or maybe Henderson finally outsourced the loading. Crew 2 to actual hyenas. Wouldn't put it past him. I tried to laugh it off, but the image stuck with me. The jerky, unnatural movements. The complete lack of hesitation. It wasn't like any fight I'd ever seen. That weekend, things escalated. Not dramatically, not yet. But the background noise of weirdness intensified. News reports became more alarming, then suddenly vague. A major hospital downtown went into lockdown. Precautionary measure due to contagious illness. The official statement read. But grainy cell phone footage. Quickly deleted from social media platforms, but saved and shared on obscure forums. I frequented for gaming news, showed pandemonium. Gurneys overturned in hallways. Figures in scrubs running in terror. Something large shattering a glass door from the inside. The quality was terrible, but you could hear screaming. Primal, terrified screaming. Then came the conflicting narratives. One station reported a containment breach of an unknown pathogen. Another insisted it was a localized terrorist attack, using a nerve agent. A government spokesperson went on air, looking pale and sweating under the studio lights, urging calm and assuring everyone that federal agencies were handling the situation. His forced smile didn't reach his eyes. His reassurances sounded hollow, rehearsed. I called my sister, Sarah, who lived across the country in Portland. The line crackled with static. "Hey, things seem weird here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You guys okay over there?" "Weird how?" Her voice sounded distant, strained. "Yeah, Alex, we're fine. Just people are acting strange here too. Lots of police activity. They're saying it's some kind of protest getting out of hand downtown." There was a crash in the background on her end. "Listen, I gotta go. Mark just got home. Stay safe, okay? Lock your doors. You too, Sarah. I love you. Love you too, bro." The line went dead. An unsettling knot formed in my stomach. Protests. Contagious illness. Terrorist attack. None of it added up. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house sounded like an intruder. Every distant siren made my heart pound. I found myself checking the locks on my doors and windows repeatedly. I pulled up online news sites, hopping between local and national sources. The stories were becoming more fragmented, more confusing. Some sites were down entirely. Social media was a wildfire of panic, rumors, and horrifying, unverifiable accounts of attacks. People biting people. Unstoppable assailants shrugging off injuries. The word "a zombie" started appearing first tentatively, then with increasing frequency and terror. I scoffed. Zombies. It was ridiculous. Straight out of the movies I used to watch for fun. This was real life. There had to be a rational explanation. A new drug. a weaponized virus causing psychotic breaks, mass hysteria fueled by fear anything but that. Yet, the grainy footage from Phoenix, the sounds on the deleted hospital video, the look in the spokesperson's eyes, a cold dread seeped into me, deeper than logic could reach. The next day was Monday. I woke up groggy, nerves frayed. Against my better judgment, I decided to go to work. Routine felt like the only anchor I had left. Maybe seeing the familiar beige walls and hearing Eve complain about the coffee muff sheen would make the world feel normal again. It was a mistake. The commute was a nightmare. Traffic wasn't just slow, it was gridlocked in places, with abandoned cars blocking lanes. People were driving recklessly, cutting each other off, laying on their horns incessantly. I saw a fender bender escalate into a screaming match that looked dangerously close to becoming physical before I managed to inch past. Police presence was heavy, but they seemed overwhelmed, mostly directing traffic away from certain areas or standing by, looking tense and uncertain. Downtown was chaos. Not the usual hustle and bustle, but a frantic, fearful energy. People were rushing, eyes wide, not making eye contact. Shops were shuttered. Metal grates pulled down. Emergency vehicles screamed past with alarming regularity. I saw National Guard trucks rumbling down streets, usually reserved for taxis and delivery vans. Soldiers in full gear stood at intersections, weapons held ready, waving cars through specific roads, blocking off others. Their faces were grim, unreadable. My office building's lobby was eerily quiet. The usual security guard, a friendly older guy named Frank, wasn't at his desk. The lights were on, but most of the offices on the lower floors were dark. The elevator ride up felt unnaturally long, the silence punctuated only by the low hum and the ding of passing floors. Our floor was sparsely populated. Maybe a dozen people out of the usual 100. Dave wasn't there. Neither was Margaret from accounting. Mr. Henderson's office door was closed, but I didn't hear any muffled phone calls today. Just silence. I sat down at my desk, the familiar glow of the monitors doing little to comfort me. I tried logging into the system. Access denied. Strange. I tried my admin credentials. Access denied. My blood ran cold. I never lost admin access. I checked the network status indicators. Everything was red. Total system failure. Not just our branch, everything. Phoenix, Dallas, Chicago, New York. All offline. All dark. What the hell? I muttered, spinning in my chair. Sarah Chen, from marketing, was huddled by the windows overlooking the street, her face pale. A few others were gathered near her, murmuring anxiously. "Alex, look at this," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. I walked over. Down on the street below, maybe 12 stories down, chaos reigned. It wasn't a riot anymore. It was something else. People were running, screaming, falling. And among them, weaving through the panic, were others. Figures moving with that same jerky, unnatural gait I'd seen on the Phoenix feed. They were stumbling, yet strangely purposeful. They were attacking people. Not punching or kicking, but lunging, biting, tearing. One figure, a man in a torn business suit, tackled a fleeing woman. She screamed as he fell upon her, his head bent down towards her neck. He didn't get up. Another figure, a woman in jogging clothes with one arm hanging at an impossible angle, shambled towards a group huddled in a doorway. They tried to push her back, but she seemed oblivious, pushing forward relentlessly, her mouth open in a silent snarl. Then I saw it. A police officer, trying to hold back one of the stumbling figures. He fired his sidearm, once, twice, 3 times, center mass. The figure staggered, dark holes appearing on its shirt, but it didn't stop, reaching for the horrified officer. The officer fumbled, trying to reload or clear a jam, and the figure lunged, grabbing him, pulling him down. My breath hitched, my stomach churned. This wasn't drugs. This wasn't psychosis. Those people weren't stopping. They weren't reacting to pain. They were relentless. They were hungry. The word I'd been desperately avoiding screamed in my mind. Zombies. Panic erupted in the office. Someone screamed. Someone else started sobbing. "We have to get out of here," shouted Mark from sales, his voice cracking. "Get out where?" Sarah cried, backing away from the window. "It's happening everywhere." Suddenly, the emergency lights flickered on, casting the office in an eerie, dim glow as the main power cut out. The hum of the servers died, plunging us into a deeper, more terrifying silence, broken only by the distant screams from the street and our own ragged breathing. "The stairwell," I yelled, finding my voice. My IT brain, the part that thrived on troubleshooting crises, kicked in, overriding the sheer terror for a moment. "We need to get to the emergency stairwell. Forget the elevators." We stumbled towards the heavy fire door at the end of the hall. Mark yanked it open, revealing the concrete steps, leading down into darkness. The sounds from the street seemed louder here, echoing up the shaft. Were those groans? Shuffling footsteps? "Come on, move!" I urged, pushing people forward. We started descending, our footsteps echoing unnervingly. The air grew colder, staler. Emergency lights provided minimal illumination every few floors. We passed floor after floor, the doors locked from the stairwell side. The sounds from outside faded slightly, replaced by the closer, more intimate sounds of our own fear whimpers, harsh breathing, the frantic pounding of our hearts. We were about halfway down, maybe around the 6th floor, when we heard it. Pounding, not from the street below, but from one of the floor access doors ahead of us. A heavy, rhythmic banging. Being. Being. We froze. Everyone looked at each other, eyes wide with terror in the dim emergency lighting. Being. CRK. The metal door bulged inward slightly near the handle. Whatever was on the other side was strong, and it wanted in. "Keep going," I whispered urgently, quietly. "Move." We crept past the pounding door, holding our breath, pressing ourselves against the far wall. The banging intensified, metal screeching, as it began to buckle. Just as we cleared the landing below it, the door burst inwards with a deafening crash. I didn't look back. Nobody did. We scrambled down the remaining flights, terror lending speed to our feet. The sounds of shuffling, guttural groans echoed down the stairwell from behind us. They were inside the stairwell now. They were coming. We burst out into the ground floor lobby. It was chaos. Broken glass littered the floor. Furniture was overturned. The front revolving doors were shattered, jammed halfway. Through the broken glass, I could see them, the stumbling figures, shambling aimlessly on the plaza outside, drawn by the noise we'd made. And Frank, the friendly security guard, he was there, or what was left of him. He was slumped against his desk, his uniform torn, his skin pale and waxy. His head lolled to one side, his eyes milky white and vacant. As we watched in horror, he let out a low, wet groan and began to twitch, his fingers spasming. He was turning. "Oh God," Sarah sobbed. There was another door, a service exit leading to the back alley and the parking garage. It was our only chance. "This way," I yelled, pointing. We ran, stumbling over debris. Mark reached the door first and threw his weight against the push bar. It opened onto a narrow, grimy alley. Freedom. Or so I thought. As I pushed Sarah through the doorway, I glanced back one last time. Frank, the guard, was lurching to his feet, his movements jerky and unnatural, and descending the stairs we had just fled. Their silhouettes framed in the dim light were more figures. Stumbling, groaning, coming towards the sounds, towards us. We spilled out into the alley, gasping for air, hearts hammering. The sounds of the city were different here, closer, more visceral. Screams, crashes, the distant chatter of gunfire, and underneath it all, a low, persistent moaning that seemed to come from everywhere at once. We huddled together for a second, adrenaline warring with paralyzing fear. "My car parking garage," Mark stammered. "No good," I said, my mind racing. "Too confined." We saw what happened in the stairwell. We need space, options. Before anyone could argue, a guttural roar echoed from the end of the alley. A figure stumbled into view from behind a dumpster, a large man, clothes ragged, face smeared with something dark. His eyes were vacant, focused solely on us. He started shambling forward, faster than I would have thought possible, arms outstretched, a low moan rising in his throat. We scattered. Pure instinct took over. Mark and a couple of others bolted towards the parking garage entrance despite my warning. Sarah grabbed my arm, her eyes wide with terror. "Alex, what do we do?" There was no time to think. Another figure appeared at the other end of the alley, blocking the exit to the main street. We were trapped. The first figure was closing in. "Up," I yelled, spotting a rusty fire escape ladder fixed to the side of our building, leading up towards the rooftops.
"It's our only way."
"Go," I shoved Sarah towards it, then turned to face the shambling man, grabbing a discarded piece of metal pipe from the ground. It felt flimsy, useless, but it was all I had. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. My breath came in ragged gasps. This was it. The beige cubicle. The traffic jams, the microwave dinners, that world was gone. This was the new world. And it was hungry. The figure groaned, lunged, and my grip tightened on the pipe. Survival wasn't a choice anymore. It was the only thing left. The pipe felt absurdly light in my shaking hands. Heavy. Industrial, grade steel, probably weighing 10 pounds. Yet it felt like a twig against the oncoming horror. The man it shambled closer, its jaw hanging slack. revealing broken, yellowed teeth coated in something dark and viscous. One eye socket was empty, just a ragged hole crawling with flies attracted to the decay. The other eye, milky and blind, fixed on me with horrifying, predatory intensity. A low, wet groan rattled in its chest, a sound that scraped against my sanity.
Alex? Climb.
Sarah screamed from halfway up the fire escape, her voice thin with terror. I couldn't. Not yet. The thing was too close. It lunged, surprisingly fast for its shambling gait. I sidestepped clumsily, adrenaline dumping into my system like fire. It missed, stumbling past me, arms windmilling. It recovered quickly, turning with that same jerky, unnatural motion. The smell hit me then, rotting meat, stale blood, and something else, something chemical and wrong, like ozone and decay mixed together. It made my stomach heave. It came at me again. This time, I didn't dodge. Pop culture, countless hours spent battling digital monsters, screamed one thing in my head: the head. I swung the pipe, not aiming, just reacting. A wild, desperate arc. It connected with the side of its skull with a sickening thud. I expected it to go down, to crumple like in the movies. It didn't. It staggered, its head snapping to the side at an unnatural angle. But it stayed upright. It turned its head back towards me, the single milky eye fixing on me again. The groan intensified, louder now, laced with something that sounded almost like annoyance. There was no pain, no shock, just relentless, unthinking aggression. Panic clawed at my throat. It wasn't working. What I thought I knew was wrong. It raised its arms, fingers curled into claws, dark blood dripping from ragged fingernails, and lunged again. This time, I brought the pipe down vertically, like an axe, aiming for the top of its head with all the strength my terrified body could muster. There was a sound like a coconut splitting open. Wet, percussive, final. The thing stopped instantly. Its forward momentum carried it forward a step. Then it crumpled, collapsing like a puppet with its strings cut, landing in a heap at my feet. Dark, thick fluid oozed from the massive head wound. I stared down at it, chest heaving, pipe trembling in my grip. Bile rose in my throat. I doubled over, gave, but nothing came up. The reality of what I'd just done, the sheer visceral horror of it, crashed over me. I hadn't just fought. I'd destroyed something that used to be human. The finality of it, the grotesque mess at my feet, it was too much. Alex? Sarah's shriek snapped me back. I looked up. She was near the top of the fire escape. Below her, the other zombie, the one from the far end of the alley, was shuffling closer, drawn by the sounds of the struggle. And worse, more groans echoed from the street entrance to the alley. They were converging. "Coming!" I yelled, my voice hoarse. I dropped pipe. It felt contaminated, vile, and scrambled for the ladder. My hands slipped on the rusty rungs. My feet fumbled for purchase. Every muscle screamed in protest. I glanced down. The second zombie was almost at the base of the ladder, its vacant eyes looking up, its mouth opening and closing, emitting that low, horrible groan. Dark shapes were moving in the mouth of the alley. 4, maybe 5 of them. "Hurry!" "Oh God. Hurry!" Sarah sobbed from above. I climbed, fueled by sheer terror. The old metal ladder groaned and swayed under my weight. Rusted bolts scraped against the brickwork. Each upward pull felt like lifting lead. My lungs burned. My arms felt like noodles. I didn't dare look down again. I just focused on the rung above, then the next, then the next. Sarah's terrified face peered down at me, urging me on. I felt a tug at my ankle. A cold, vice-like grip. I kicked out wildly, instinctively connecting with something solid. The grip loosened, but I heard an enraged, guttural snarl from below. I scrambled faster, pulling myself up the last few rungs onto the narrow platform where Sarah stood. She grabbed my arm, hauling me the rest of the way onto the slightly wider expanse of the main roof. We collapsed onto the gritty tar surface, gasping for breath, chests heaving. Below us, the fire escape rattled violently as multiple sets of hands grabbed at the lower rungs, shaking it, trying to follow. The groans rose in a horrifying chorus. For a few minutes, we just lay there, side by side, staring up at the indifferent gray sky, listening to the cacophony below. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion and trembling shock. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Sarah was crying silently, tears tracing paths through the grime on her cheeks. Slowly, cautiously, I pushed myself up into a sitting position. My body ached in places I didn't know could ache. I looked around. We were on the roof of our 12-story office building. Vents, air conditioning units, satellite dishes, and gravel dotted the tar paper landscape. And beyond the low parapet wall at the edge, the city. It was worse than I could have imagined from the window or the alley. Havenwood City was burning. Thick plumes of black smoke rose from multiple locations across the skyline downtown, the industrial district near the river, even out towards the suburbs. The constant wail of sirens was now sporadic, often cutting off abruptly. Distant gunfire popped and echoed, sometimes single shots, sometimes sustained bursts. Helicopters crisscrossed the sky, but they flew erratically. One, a large military-looking chopper, flew low over a nearby skyscraper, seemed to hover for a moment, then suddenly listed violently to one side and plummeted downwards behind a row of buildings, followed by a muffled crump and a fresh billow of black smoke. There was no order, no organized response, just chaos. Screams drifted up from the streets, faint but persistent. And underlying it all, that constant, low-level moaning. The sound of the horde seemed to emanate from the very concrete heart of the city. The scale of it was suffocating. This wasn't contained. This wasn't localized. This was the end of everything. "Oh God, Alex," Sarah whispered, sitting up beside me, pulling her knees to her chest. Her eyes reflected the fiery panorama. "Mark the others. They went to the garage." I didn't answer. I couldn't. The image of Frank, the security guard, lurching to his feet, his eyes milky white, flashed in my mind. The figures descending the stairs. The odds were they weren't good. Guilt gnawed at me. Should I have forced them to come with us? Could I have saved them? "We need to check ourselves," I said, forcing the words out, needing something practical to focus on. Any bites, scratches, anything. We examined each other carefully, patting down arms, legs, necks. My ankle throbbed where the thing had grabbed me, but the thick denim of my jeans had held. No broken skin. Sarah seemed okay too. Just scrapes and bruises from the frantic escape. Relief washed over me, brief but potent. Then the reality of our situation crashed back in. We were trapped on a rooftop, 12 stories above a city overrun by them. I emptied my pockets. Keys, wallet with useless cash and cards, my phone displaying no service, and a crumpled energy bar wrapper. My work laptop bag lay nearby where I'd dropped it, heavy, bulky, and utterly useless now. Sarah had her purse, phone. Also no signal. Wallet. Keys. A half-used tube of lipstick. Some tissues. A small bottle of hand sanitizer. That was it. No food. No water. No real weapons now that I'd left the pipe in the alley. The sounds from below continued, a constant reminder of the danger. The groaning, the shuffling, the occasional scream that cut off too quickly. But then, a new sound. Closer. Not from the street, but from nearby on the roof. Thump. Thump. Scrape. We froze listening. It came again, louder this time. Teach. UMP. Being. Teach EMP. It was coming from a heavy metal door set into a small, windowless concrete structure. Near the center of the roof, the stairwell access. The door we hadn't used. The door that led back down into the building. We had just desperately fled. Something was pounding on it from the inside. No. Sarah breathed, her eyes wide with fresh terror. They can't get up here, can they? Bang! CREEP! The metal of the door dented outwards. Dust puffed from around the frame. Whatever was hitting it was strong and persistent. The fragile sense of safety we'd felt moments ago evaporated completely. We weren't safe. We were cornered. Exposed. Okay, think. I muttered, forcing down the rising panic. My IT training kicked in again, assess the situation. Identify threats, find solutions. The immediate threat was the door. The secondary threat was everything below. The primary need was escape. We can't stay here, I said, my voice low and urgent. I crawled towards the edge of the roof, peering cautiously over the parapet. The alley below was thick with them now. Shambling figures drawn by the earlier commotion, bumping into each other, groaning up at the fire escape, which was now bent and mangled near the bottom. No way back down that way. I scanned the adjacent buildings. Our office building was part of a block. To the left was a slightly shorter building, maybe 10 stories, housing law offices according to the sign I used to see every day. Its roof looked flat, similar to ours. The gap between the buildings was maybe 8 feet. A terrifying jump, especially with a 12-story drop onto zombie-infested pavement waiting below. To the right was a taller, newer glass skyscraper. Too tall, too sheer. No way across. Behind us was the street we'd faced from the office windows, now a river of chaos. Directly across the street were more buildings, but the distance was impossible. The building next door, I said, pointing to the left. The law office. It's lower. Maybe we can jump it. Sarah crept over beside me, peering down, then across the gap. Her face paled further.
Jump? Alex, that's insane. It's too far.
And what if there are more of them over there?
Heck,
The stairwell door buckled further, the locking mechanism screeching in protest. A sliver of darkness appeared near the handle.
Staying here is insane!
I shot back, louder than I intended. That door won't hold. We have maybe minutes before whatever's in there gets out. It's that roof or nothing. We looked at each other, fear stark in her eyes, desperation probably blazing in mine. What choice did we have? Wait for the inevitable horror behind us, or risk the terrifying leap ahead? Just then, another sound cut through the din, the whoomp, whump whump of helicopter blades, close this time. We looked up, hope surging irrationally. A news chopper, hovering unsteadily about 50 yards away, level with our rooftop. We could see the camera lens pointed towards the chaos below.
Hey! Up here! Help us!
Sarah screamed, waving frantically. I joined her, waving, yelling, trying to attract their attention. For a heart-stopping moment, the helicopter turned slightly towards us. Could they see us? Would they land? Then, something happened on the rooftop across the street from the chopper. Figures swarmed the landing pad up there. Infected. They must have come up from inside that building. They surged towards the edges, drawn by the noise and vibration of the helicopter. One tumbled off the edge, falling silently for a few floors before hitting an awning. The news chopper suddenly lurched, dipping dangerously. We saw figures clinging to its landing skids, infected, somehow managing to hold on. The chopper spun erratically, trying to shake them off. One fell, then another. The helicopter tilted violently, smoke pouring from its tail rotor. It careened sideways, directly towards the glass skyscraper next to us. We flinched instinctively, as it slammed in the side of the glass tower, maybe 20 floors up, with a deafening crash of shattering glass and shearing metal. Fire erupted instantly. The wreckage slid down the face of the building, leaving a burning scar, before exploding in a massive fireball near the base. Debris rained down onto the street, onto the horde below, onto adjacent rooftops. Burning fuel sprayed outwards. We stared, horrified, speechless. Any lingering hope of rescue, of authority regaining control, died in that fiery wreck. We were completely, utterly on our own. CRUNCH. The sound ripped our attention back to the stairwell door. A jagged hole had appeared near the top hinge. We could see movement through it. Something pale and twitching in the darkness within. A low, guttural moan seeped out.
No, Sarah! We have to go now!
I yelled, grabbing her arm, pulling her towards the edge overlooking the adjacent rooftop. The gap looked wider than ever. 8 feet. Maybe 10. A running jump. Onto a roof that might hold more horrors. With the sounds of splintering metal and hungry moans growing louder right behind us. We stood poised on the edge, the wind whipping around us, carrying the stench of smoke and decay. Below, the abyss waited. Behind, the nightmare clawed its way through metal. There was no choice, only the leap. The roar of the infected breaking through the stairwell door on the other roof propelled us forward. There was no time for hesitation, no time for measuring the distance or calculating the risk. It was jump or die. Go! I screamed, shoving Sarah forward, slightly to give her momentum. She took 3 running steps, a small, choked sob escaping her lips, and launched herself into the void. For a heart-stopping second, she hung suspended against the backdrop of smoke and chaos, then disappeared below the lip of the adjacent roof. I heard a cry, pain or fear. I couldn't tell, just as I took my own running start. My foot pushed off the gritty tar paper, and suddenly, the world dropped away. Wind screamed past my ears. The 12-story drop yawned below me, a dizzying panorama of broken pavement and shambling figures that seemed to reach up with skeletal hands. My stomach lurched into my throat. I flailed instinctively in mid-air, trying to maximize my distance. My eyes locked onto the edge of the target roof. Too short. Was I going to hit the wall? I crashed down onto the gravelly surface of the lower roof, harder than I expected. Pain exploded in my right ankle as it twisted under me. I cried out, collapsing onto my side, the impact knocking the wind out of me. Gravel bit into my cheek and palms. For a moment, I just lay there, gasping, stars dancing in my vision.
Alex!
Sarah was beside me, her face ghostly pale, hands hovering uncertainly. Are you okay? Did you break it? I pushed myself up, testing the ankle. Sharp pain shot up my leg, but it seemed to hold my weight, albeit grudgingly. Twisted. I gasped. I think it's okay. Just twisted. You. She nodded, rubbing her shoulder where she'd clearly landed hard. Bruised. Scared half to death. But okay. She glanced back towards the roof we'd just vacated. Figures were now spilling out of the stairwell. Structure up there, the jerky. Unmistakable silhouettes of the infected. They shambled towards the edge, groaning, drawn by our recent presence. One stumbled right off, plummeting silently down into the alley below. We both flinched, looking away. We need to get off this roof, I said, my voice raspy. Adrenaline was already fading, leaving behind the throbbing pain in my ankle and a profound sense of dread. I scanned our new surroundings. This roof was slightly smaller than the last one, cluttered with more HVAC units and vents. A single rusted metal door, presumably another stairwell access, was set into a low concrete block near the far edge. No fire escape visible on this side. No obvious supplies. Just gravel, tar, and the endless, horrifying symphony rising from the streets. That door, Sarah said, pointing. It's the only way down, isn't it? Looks like it. I hobbled towards it, Sarah staying close beside me. We listened intently, pressing our ears against the cold metal. Silence. No pounding, no groaning from the other side. Was it empty? Or were they waiting quietly within? The silence was almost worse than the noise. The door had a simple handle but no external lock. It looked like it opened outwards. I took a deep breath, exchanged a look with Sarah, a look that acknowledged the terrible risk we were about to take, and pulled the handle. Smoothly, silently, revealing a dark concrete stairwell identical to the one in our office building. The air that wafted out was stale, however, carrying the faint scent of cleaning supplies and old paper, thankfully lacking the immediate stench of death we'd encountered before. But underneath, there was a faint, metallic tang blood. Okay, I whispered, gripping a heavy-duty stapler. I'd inexplicably stuffed into my laptop bag before fleeing the office, now feeling marginally better than being empty-handed. Sarah held the small, almost useless bottle of hand sanitizer like a weapon. Stay quiet. Listen. Move slow. Stick together. We slipped inside, pulling the heavy door closed behind us, plunging ourselves into near total darkness. The sounds of the city were instantly muffled, replaced by an oppressive silence that magnified the thumping of our own hearts and the rasp of our breathing. I fumbled for my phone, the screen casting a weak, ghostly light on the steps leading down. Sarah did the same with hers, the twin beams barely cutting through the gloom. 10th floor, Sarah whispered, reading the number stenciled on the wall. 10 flights down to street level. 10 floors of potential horrors. We started our descent, each step agonizingly slow, each footfall echoing slightly in the enclosed space. My injured ankle protested with every downward step, forcing me to lean heavily on the grimy handrail. We moved like ghosts, pausing every few steps to listen, straining our ears for any sound, shuffling, groaning, breathing. The upper floors seemed eerily untouched. Through the small, wired glass windows in the stairwell doors, we glimpsed offices frozen in time. Desks cluttered with files, computer monitors dark, half-eaten lunches abandoned on breakroom tables. A child's drawing taped to a cubicle wall. Haunting reminders of the normalcy that had evaporated just hours before. It felt like walking through a tomb. Around the 8th floor, the smell started. Faint at first, then stronger. That metallic tang mixed with something else, something sickly sweet and cloying. Decay. We slowed further, pressing ourselves against the wall, phone lights dimmed to mere pinpricks. As we reached the landing between the 8th and 7th floors, we heard it. A faint, wet, tearing sound coming from behind the closed stairwell door leading to the 7th floor, followed by a low, guttural munching. We froze, hearts hammering. Sarah's hand clamped onto my arm, her nails digging in. We didn't need to see through the door to know what was happening. Something was feeding in there. Quietly. Slowly, we backed up a few steps, then continued down, bypassing the 7th floor door as if walking on eggshells. The sounds faded slightly as we descended, but the knowledge of what was happening just feet away sent icy tendrils of fear down my spine. On the 6th floor, we found our first concrete sign of violence. The stairwell door here was slightly ajar. Splatters of dark blood stained the wall and floor nearby. A single, expensive-looking high-heeled shoe lay on its side just inside the doorway. We peered cautiously through the gap. An empty reception area. More blood smeared on the carpet. An overturned potted plant. But no bodies, living or dead. Whatever happened here, the participants were gone. We kept moving, the tension mounting with every floor we cleared. The silence felt heavy, pregnant with unseen threats. Was the building largely empty? Or were they lurking behind every closed door? Waiting. Near the 4th floor, my foot slipped on something slick. I caught myself on the handrail, stifling a cry of pain as my ankle flared. I shone my light down. A dark, viscous pool was spreading from under the 4th floor door. Fresh blood. and mixed with it, shell casings, several of them glinting in the weak light. Someone had made a stand here recently, and judging by the amount of blood, they hadn't won. "We need something better," I whispered, my voice shaking slightly. The stapler felt pathetic. A weapon. We decided to risk checking the fourth floor, just briefly. Pushing the door open slowly, we peered into a darkened corridor lined with offices. Empty. We slipped inside, moving quickly. Most doors were locked. One, however, stood slightly ajar. Inside, chaos. Desk overturned, papers scattered. A computer monitor smashed on the floor. And slumped in the corner, a man in a security guard uniform. Unmoving. No obvious wounds from this angle, but his stillness was unnerving. "Is here?" Sarah started. "Don't know," I interrupted. "Don't care. Look for anything useful." While Sarah kept a nervous watch on the slumped guard, I quickly scanned the office. Nothing obvious. Then, on the floor, half kicked under the desk, I saw it. A heavy metal flashlight. The long kind, maglite style, built like a truncheon. Perfect. I grabbed it. It felt solid. Hefty in my hand. Infinitely better than the stapler. As I straightened up, the security guard groaned. We both froze, snapping our heads towards him. He groaned again, louder this time, and his head twitched. His eyes snapped open. They were milky white. "Go!" I hissed, grabbing Sarah's arm and pulling her back into the corridor, slamming the office door shut, just as the newly turned guard lurched to his feet inside, starting to pound on the door from the other side. We didn't wait. We fled back into the stairwell, hearts pounding. The sound of the guard's enraged snarls and heavy blows against the door echoing behind us. The momentary relief of finding a weapon was instantly replaced by sheer terror. They were here, inside, with us. The descent became frantic again. We half ran, half stumbled down the remaining flights, my ankles screaming in protest, fear overriding the pain. Third floor. Second floor. The sounds from the street grew louder. Clearer now, the chorus of groans. The shuffling feet, the occasional distant crash or scream. We reached the final landing, the one leading down to the ground floor lobby. We stopped, panting, listening. No immediate sounds from the lobby itself, but the noise from outside was intense. I cautiously approached the stairwell door, which had another small, wired, glass window. Wiping away some grime, I peered through. The lobby was dimly lit by the emergency lights, and the gray daylight filtering through the tall front windows. It was large, floored, with plush seating areas and dead plants. Like the upper floors, it showed signs of sudden abandonment, scattered newspapers, an overturned luggage cart, a spilled cup of coffee staining the pristine floor. The main, revolving doors were shattered and blocked by a hastily assembled barricade of furniture, couches, heavy planters, reception desks, clearly made by people trying to keep something out. But the barricade hadn't held completely. Or maybe the threat had come from within. Because slumped against the inside of the barricade and lying scattered across the lobby floor were bodies. At least 5 or 6 that I could see. Some still clearly dead. Others twitching. One, a woman in a business suit lying near the elevators, slowly pushed herself up, her spine bending at an impossible angle, her head lolling as she emitted a low groan. And outside, pressing against the floor, two ceiling glass windows that flanked the broken revolving doors, was the horde. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, packed tightly together. Faces distorted, eyes vacant, mouths working silently or emitting low moans. They clawed uselessly at the glass, drawn by the movement of the turning infected inside. Their sheer numbers a terrifying, undulating wave of decaying flesh. We were on the ground floor, but we were trapped. Inside, the newly turned were beginning to stir. Outside, a sea of death awaited. I looked across the street, through the gaps in the crowd of bodies, pressing against the glass. An abandoned police cruiser sat parked haphazardly, its lights still flashing weakly. Protection, supplies, weapons. It might as well have been on the moon. "Alex?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling, her eyes fixed on the horrors in the lobby and beyond the glass. "What do we do now? How do we possibly get through that?" I gripped the heavy flashlight, its metal cool against my sweaty palm. I looked at the stirring bodies in the lobby, then at the impenetrable wall of monsters outside. My ankle throbbed. Exhaustion pulled at me. For the first time, a chilling thought seeped through the adrenaline and fears. Maybe we didn't get through. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was where we died. The moment hung suspended, thick with the stench of decay from outside, and the coppery tang of blood inside. We stood in the relative quiet of the ravaged lobby, the sounds of the stirring infected nearby, a wet cough, a scraping noise, the slow drag of a limb grating against the thunderous beat of my own heart. Outside, the horde pressed against the glass, a silent, writhing tapestry of death. The police car across the street seemed miles away, a mirage in a desert of horrors. Despair flickered in my chest, cold and sharp. Maybe this is it. "No," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible but fierce. She wasn't looking at me, but at the woman in the business suit who was now slowly, unsteadily, trying to climb over the reception desk, her movements jerky and broken. "It isn't." Something in her voice, a spark of defiance I hadn't expected, ignited a similar flicker in me. We hadn't come this far, jumped across rooftops, navigated darkened corridors filled with unimaginable horrors, faced death at every turn only to die here, trapped between glass and grasping claws. "The ones inside first," I said, hefting the maglite. Its weight felt reassuring. Quietly. The turned businesswoman was closest. She hadn't fully regained coordination yet, stumbling over the desk debris. I moved fast, hobbling on my throbbing ankle, flanking her before she properly registered my presence. I swung the flashlight horizontally, aiming for her temple. The impact was solid, skull-crushing. She went down without a sound, collapsing behind the desk. One less. Sarah had grabbed a heavy, duty fire extinguisher from the wall mount near the elevators. Another figure, a man in a maintenance uniform, was lurching out from behind a large marble pillar, groaning low in his chest. Sarah didn't hesitate. She sprayed the CO2 foam directly into its face. It staggered back, blinded and disoriented, clawing at its eyes. That gave me the opening I needed. Another swift, brutal swing of the maglite to the back of its head, and it crumpled. Two more were stirring further across the lobby, near the shattered revolving doors. We moved together, stalking them through the overturned furniture. They were slower, seemingly confused by their new state. A coordinated attack, Sarah, using the extinguisher again to disorient. Me following up with the flashlight, and they were down, silenced before they could make enough noise to further agitate the horde outside. We stood panting in the echoing silence of the lobby, surrounded by the freshly dead and the truly dead. 6 threats neutralized. But the real army waited just beyond the glass. The main doors are suicide, Sarah stated, looking at the groaning mass outside. Agreed. We need another way. Service exit. Parking garage access. We split up, searching frantically behind the massive reception desk, checking unmarked doors along the wall. I found it a heavy, windowless steel door tucked away in an alcove, labeled AINTANCEASERVICACS. I pressed my ear to it. Muffled sounds, distant, but fewer groans than the street front chaos. It hopefully led to a back alley or perhaps an internal corridor leading to a parking structure. It was a chance. Okay, I said, turning back to Sarah. The car is still the best bet. Supplies, protection, maybe a way out of the city center. But we need to draw them away from the front. How? My eyes scanned the lobby. What could we use? Then I spotted it behind the reception desk. Partially hidden by the downed businesswoman was a security monitoring station. Several screens were dark, but one flickered weakly. Displaying static, the emergency power was still on, at least partially. And on the console, a large red button labeled Pioneer Alarm. Would it even work? Would it draw them? Maybe this, I said, pointing. If it makes enough noise. It was a huge risk. An alarm might draw everything for blocks around, including whatever was down the surface corridor. But the horde was thickest at the front. We needed to pull them away, even for a minute. Sarah breathed, nodding grimly. What about the side street? Where will this door let out? Don't know. Alley, maybe. Hopefully connects to the street near the car. We trigger the alarm, wait maybe 10 seconds for them to react, then go out the service door and run like hell. Run like hell, she repeated, gripping the fire extinguisher. Sounds like a plan. I took a deep breath. This was it. Point of no return. I slammed my fist down on the red panic button. For a terrifying second, nothing happened. Then, ear-splitting sirens erupted throughout the lobby and, presumably, the entire building. Strobing emergency lights began flashing erratically, bathing the gruesome scene in pulses of red light. It was deafening. Outside, the reaction was immediate. The heads of the horde snapped up. The low groaning intensified into a cacophony of agitated snarls and moans. Figures began to peel away from the front windows, turning, shuffling towards the source of the overwhelming noise, the building itself, likely meaning they'd surge towards any accessible entrance, including potentially the one we were about to use. 10 seconds, I yelled over the din. Go. I yanked open the heavy service door. A narrow, concrete corridor stretched ahead, dimly lit by emergency lights. It smelled of damp concrete and garbage. We plunged inside, pulling the door shut behind us, muffling the alarm slightly but trapping us in the narrow passage. We ran. The corridor twisted, turning left, then right. We passed overflowing dumpsters, discarded cleaning equipment. Then ahead, faint daylight. An exit. It was a roll-up metal security gate, the kind used for deliveries. But it was only partially lowered, leaving a gap of about 3 feet at the bottom. Outside, an alleyway, narrower than the one behind our office building. We slid under the gate, scraping ourselves on the dirty concrete, and emerged into the relative open. The main alarm was audible but slightly muffled here. The alley seemed mostly clear. Maybe 3-4 shambling figures further down, away from the street. But the noise from the main street at the alley's mouth, just 50 yards away, was immense. The horde was definitely moving, agitated by the alarm. "The car! It's to the left!" I yelled, pointing towards the mouth of the alley. We sprinted. My ankle screamed, but I ignored it, fueled by pure adrenaline. We burst out of the alley onto the side street. The police cruiser was there, maybe 30 yards away. But the street wasn't empty. The alarm had drawn some of the horde this way too. And our sudden appearance attracted immediate attention. Figures turned towards us, groaning, beginning to shamble and lurch in our direction. 10, 15, 20 of them between us and the car. "Don't stop," I screamed. We ran straight at them. There was no finesse, no strategy. We pushed the slower ones aside, dodged the lunging grabs, stumbled over debris and fallen bodies. One grabbed the strap of Sarah's purse. She ripped it free, letting the bag fall, not breaking stride. Another lunged at me, claws outstretched. I slammed the maglite into its face without stopping, feeling cartilage crunch, and pushed past as it staggered. The sounds were a nightmare symphony, our ragged breathing, our pounding feet, the growls and snarls of the infected, the incessant blare of the alarm. From the building behind us, the distant screams and crashes from the wider city. The smell was overpowering: decay, blood, filth, smoke. We reached the car. Bodies were already converging on it, drawn by our frantic approach. "Get the window," I yelled, shoving Sarah towards the passenger side while I turned to face the closest pursuers, swinging the flashlight wildly to keep them back for a few precious seconds. Sarah slammed the base of the fire extinguisher against the passenger window. Once, twice. On the third try, the safety glass spiderwebbed, then shattered inwards. She reached through, fumbling frantically for lock, then the handle. Pulled the door open. "Get in!" I roared, smashing the maglite into the skull of a zombie that got too close, then turning and diving towards the driver's side. Sarah scrambled into the passenger seat. I yanked open the driver's door, unlocked from the inside now, and threw myself behind the wheel, slamming the door shut just as decaying hands clawed at the opening. Sarah slammed her door shut. Locked. We were inside. Safe. Hardly. The car bucked and rocked as bodies slammed against it. grotesque faces pressed against the remaining windows, mouths gnashing, eyes vacant. Fists pounded on the roof and hood. The sound was deafening, trapped inside the small space with us.
Keys!
Keys! Sarah yelled frantically, scanning the dashboard. I fumbled, patting down the steering column, checking the ignition slot empty. Visor. Nothing. Glove compartment?
Locked. Damn it.
Then I saw them. Dangling from a clip on the officer's radio mount, near the gear shift. A small set of keys. I snatched them, my hand shaking uncontrollably. Found the right one. Jammed it into the ignition. Turned. Click. Whoa, the engine struggled, groaned.
Come on, come on, come on!
I pleaded, pumping the gas pedal uselessly. Outside, a particularly large zombie slammed its shoulder against the driver's side window. Cracks appeared. I turned the key again.
Where are... Cheeky Burrowum!
The engine roared to life. Relief washed over me so intensely, I almost sobbed. I slammed the gear stick into drive. Looked at the fuel gauge, just under half a tank. Better than nothing. Between the seats, I saw the standard police issue shotgun, locked securely in its mounting rack. Useless to us right now. Hold on, I yelled. I stomped on the accelerator. The tires spun for a second on the debris, strewn asphalt, then gripped. The car lurched forward, smashing through the bodies pressed against the front bumper. There were sickening thuds, crunches, bunts, as we plowed directly into the horde that now blocked the street. Gore splattered across the windshield, momentarily blinding me. I hit the wipers. They struggled, smearing blood and viscera across the glass in grotesque arcs. I drove by instinct, aiming for the gaps, bumping and crashing through the relentless tide of bodies. Infected hammered on the car as we passed, reaching through the broken passenger window, until Sarah managed to wind it up partially. We broke through the main concentration around the law office building, fishtailing onto a wider avenue. But escape was relative. The avenue was choked with abandoned cars, burning debris, and everywhere, the dead walked. Why? Packs of them shambled down the sidewalks. Individuals stumbled into the street. Hordes gathered around scenes of carnage. We couldn't bear to look at too closely. I swerved around stalled vehicles, drove up onto the sidewalk to bypass a multi-car pileup, ignoring traffic lights that still cycled pointlessly through green, yellow, red. Smoke burned my nostrils. The scale of the destruction was absolute. Havenwood City was dead. Where were we going? I had no idea. Away. South, maybe. Towards the highway. Was the highway even clear? Was anywhere safe? Sarah was staring blankly out the smeared windshield, her face pale, her expression numb. The fire extinguisher lay spent at her feet. I glanced in the rearview mirror. The road behind us was filled with shuffling figures and burning wreckage. The law office building, the source of the still blaring alarm, receded in the distance. We had survived. We had made it through the lobby, through the horde, into a vehicle. We were alive. But the word felt hollow. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My face was smeared with dirt and maybe blood. My eyes looked haunted, older. The Alex writer who troubleshooted IT problems and complained about traffic was gone. Killed, somewhere between the 12th floor and the bloody lobby. Something else sat behind the wheel now, something harder, colder, focused only on the next threat, the next moment of survival. The world as we knew it had ended in a tide of blood and teeth. We were driving into the ruins, into a future as terrifying and uncertain as the shuffling monsters that now owned the streets. We survived today, but the apocalypse wasn't over. It was just beginning, and the ghosts of everyone who didn't make it felt like they were riding right there with us, their silent screams echoing in the roar of the engine, forever chasing us down the broken asphalt of the dead world. The creepypasta wasn't a story you read online anymore. We were living in it. And the ending hadn't been written yet,